Uh, with, with the permission of the chairman, good, good morning, Madam Chairman and honorable members of the Senate. I'll try to go very briefly through the rail sector before the Secretary caps the whole presentation. So I'd just like to walk the... Gerald, can you go to the map? The map. Just very quickly for the benefit of the senators. The rail system in Manila is basically comprised of 3 lines and PNR. So we have line 1, which is the yellow line, line 2, which is the violet line along Aurora Boulevard. Line 1 is the oldest. It was built in the 80s, and it's along Taft Avenue. And then we have line 3, which is the blue line along EDSA. Then we have PNR. I guess one distinction between PNR and the rest of the lines is it has 37 interfaces with the road. So the ability to run that train efficiently is really dramatically different from the rest of the lines in the network. The table. Again, just to sum it up, line 1 is 21 kilometers today. This will be extended under the PPP concession. Line 2 is 14 kilometers, and there's an ongoing 4-kilometer extension in the east. MRT 3 is 16 kilometers. And on the third column, we see the volume of ridership. And basically, line 1 and line 3 carry the bulk of the ridership of the whole network. Line 2 is not fully utilized. The occupancy is not that high. And then, of course, PNR, because of its interface with the road and slow operations and limited trains, has a much lower ridership of 65,000 per day. Now, the fourth column basically says what is the capacity of the system, and the fifth column is telling. The fifth column basically shows the state of affairs of our network. Line 1, only 62% of the system is actually in operations. The rest of the trains and wagons are in the depot, non-operational. Line 2, which is the newest of them all, 56% of the trains are operational. And MRT 3, 71% of the trains are operational. And then for PNR, only 46. Again, PNR, there are many legacy assets. And I guess the final column, the last column, indicates the reliability of the system. And as you can see, line 3, as the Secretary pointed out, has repeated train stoppages and problems, followed by line 1. And then line 2 is relatively new. PNR is a little misleading because it's 3 out of very few trips. I think line PNR can only run about 1/10 of the total trips of the other lines because it's a very slow train. Now, very quickly, I'll go to the matters which the Senator mentioned about policy issues. I think in the rail sector, the real problem that I'd like to highlight for the benefit of the senators is that we have a very serious supply chain problem in the rail sector. And it's manifested in how many trains are actually running. Because if you think of it, we have very innovative and ingenious engineers. But no matter what a Filipino engineer does, if he doesn't have the spare parts to keep these trains running and keep them running safe, then he is highly constrained. So spare parts is something that's true across all lines. The problem that exacerbates this is if you look at the Philippine market, we're a very small rail market, and there are very few international manufacturers. I think you have the big 5, Alstom, Bombardier, and a few others, Siemens and a few others. And therefore, when you look at our priority in the rail procurement business, we're very low. A case in point is when we went to market a couple of months ago, I think in February, to acquire 120 trains from Japanese manufacturers, nobody showed up to our bidding. The reason being, all these companies are involved in contracts of 3,000 trains, 4,000 trains, and we were ordering 120 wagons. So you can imagine, given their limited production capacity, we fell low in the priority, and we had a failed bid. Again, and I think the most difficult part is many of these trains are manufactured by what we call in the industry OEMs, or original equipment manufacturers. Think of it as a Toyota, either by a Toyota, a Honda, or a Mitsubishi. The difference between a train and a car is the car, there's basically thousands, hundreds of thousands of cars in manufacturing, and the spare parts are in inventory. In trains, because it's a very limited amount, very few stock spare parts that are unique and proprietary are kept in inventory. So we have to really develop a long-term supply chain relationship with these manufacturers. Here comes the issue which I think the senators, we'd like to call the attention of the senators to. Under our current procurement rules, we are constrained by short-term procurement, annual budgets, and at the same time, if we buy in bulk, let's say a train basically has to be overhauled in 15 years. So you have to keep the supply chain alive for around 15 years. If you're unable to buy strategically or build a strategic relationship with these OEMs, they will put your train parts out of manufacturing. They'll take it off their assembly lines, and they'll do something bigger and more lucrative. And that's why it's part of the problem really is we have to have the power to be able to buy and rebuild our warehouses and restock our warehouses. Many of our warehouses today are basically empty. And that's why when a train goes down, in other countries, when a train goes down, you pull it out of the line, you replace the part, and put it back in the line. In our system, if something goes down, you pull it out of the line, and it stays out of the line until you're able to procure parts. And because we haven't maintained this supply chain relationship, that's where the problem lies. So what we're asking in terms of special powers is to relax the procurement rules when it comes to original equipment manufacturers. Not ball bearings, not tracks, because tracks are commodities. But there are certain goods in the industry which are very proprietary. So if you buy a Siemens train, you have to make sure you have the Siemens train spare parts for the next 15 years. And that goes into strategic contracting, which under our procurement rules are very difficult. That's why, as much as we plan to rebuild the system in 2 years, I think the strategic system, the strategic solution really is to get PPP partners who could then have more leeway in terms of establishing long-term relationship with suppliers. So there's a short-term solution under the special powers and a long-term solution to really solve the strategic problem of the rail industry, which is not unique to the Philippines. It's just exacerbated in the Philippines. The next item, and may I just add, we consulted this with the people who are really running the system. And too often when they try to buy parts on the long term, because they're unable to consume it in 1 year, they're questioned by COA in terms of you didn't spend it, therefore you overpurchased, and they are then hit with disallowances. For government people in the agencies, a disallowance of 100 million pesos or 10 million pesos could mean the difference between collecting your retirement or get an ombudsman case. So it is really the Bids and Awards Committee in the agencies are very cowed and intimidated by this interpretation of COA on the rules. The next slide, I'll go very quickly. Again, it's related to procurement, but again, and it goes to the point of being cowed. Too often when, sabi nga ni Secretary, may winner and may loser. The loser either goes to the court, intimidates the Bids and Awards Committees in the media, threatens them, starts dropping names, and then it really cows the Bids and Awards Committee. Now, we understand that there always has to be redress, but if we could raise this at the court at a very high level, wherein, yes, if there is reason to question the procurement, then it should be questioned. But if we could say at the until it reaches the Supreme Court, we assume a regularity of the transaction. And to the Secretary's point, we have, under his leadership, we will be held to account on these types of procurements. So I think this is the second point, again, procurement related. And finally, just one last point, right of way. As we build the network, to the Senator's point about building a network, we have to buy depots and stations strategically. Now, do we have the detailed engineering of these depots at this point in time? I don't think we have them. And because this is a very dynamic design process. But nevertheless, if we don't buy the depots today, then by the time we do need them, there's a building on top, there's a mall on top, and it really just makes the whole planning and procurement process a little more difficult. So it's really the strategic nature of the procurement system where we need help in this particular sector. I guess it applies to all, but it's very acute in the rail sector because it's a small market. Although you deal with big projects, you have very few transactions globally, and we're a very small market in the global rail sector. So thank you very much, Madam Chairman.
Thank you for your presentation, Yusek Quintanar.